Borderlands 3 arguably has the best qualities of the franchise. Well, not entirely, but the mechanics are more refined and the gameplay loop is more or less identical to its predecessors, as it should be, as it's technically the latest release in the Borderlands franchise, considering Wonderlands is technically a spin-off. Gameplay wise, Borderlands 3 is my favourite of the bunch, however it doesn't come with no downsides, basically meaning that it isn't a perfect game all around. But that's what we're here today to discuss, what Borderlands 3 did right and what Borderlands 3 did wrong. Just a reminder that these are my own opinions, so if you disagree on some points I'd love to hear them in the comments, but yeah, I'm going to break the video up into different segments, so if you want to skip to certain parts feel free. But we're first going to talk about the maps and the world design, then the gameplay, guns, story, DLCs, and the endgame content. These are the main aspects of a Borderlands game that makes it good or bad in my opinion. So with that said, let's get started. World design. The most notable thing with the maps in Borderlands 3 is the fact that it's the only game where you leave Pandora, except the pre-sequel of course, where it's on Elpis, which is Pandora's moon. But in this game, you travel to multiple different planets as you progress through the stories and the DLCs. There's a total of 5 in the base game and an additional 3 in the DLCs. Not just that, but there are other locations you have to travel to off-planet, such as the Malawan space station for the slaughter thingies. So from this, we know that the game features a broader and much larger scale of maps, but do they sustain the same level as detail and ergonomics for the player? Well, yeah, they do. Throughout the entire game, you'll notice that they have the same level of detail as the previous games. However, I will admit in some areas it's a bit lackluster. An example of this would be the final part where you meet Typhon de Leon on the planet Necrodefeo. This is the planet where he resides, and it just seems quite dull and boring in my opinion. Not only that, but if you really want to be harsh, some areas where you're meant to only drive through, such as the part with Maya in that one driving mission through Promethea, there's not much to explore there, which is fine because its main purpose is for that mission mainly, but still it's worth noting. Overall though, the world still feels like Borderlands, but just on a larger scale, and I personally think being able to explore these cities and overgrown planets as opposed to just the gritty Pandora is a good thing, as it makes the game feel less barren. You'll only ever really notice a lack of detail in maps if you're intentionally looking for it. One great thing about Borderlands 3 is that the mantling and the sliding, it gives a lot more potential in the map design, and it's utilized very well. You find some areas that require you to make a certain jump or secret areas in order to access. You'll need to do a bit of maneuvering. Considering all of this, I'd say that Borderlands 3 manages to do really well with the world design. Gameplay. Now, when I say gameplay, I'm more focusing on how different the game feels mechanically compared to any of the previous Borderlands games. Now, I just mentioned that you can vault over things and mantle. You can also slide, and these 3 movement changes are better and a step in the right direction for the franchise. It just makes moving around the map a lot more free-flowing and easier. But other than these movement changes, what else changed? Well, the gunplay feels completely different too. Other than the guns being a lot more unique and fun to use, the actual feeling of shooting a gun feels so much more refined. It's familiar to its previous shooting mechanics, but just better. Not throwing shade on the previous games, as they're more than fine and built the foundations of the franchise. But I do love how the gunplay feels in this game. It's just a lot more smoother and there's nothing really to complain about it. But moving away from the mechanical part of the gameplay and more towards the actual gameplay loop. Is it the same as the other Borderlands games or is it different? Well, fundamentally it's the same. You get guns, you kill enemies, you get more guns, and you kill more enemies. But what has changed? Now, this is not a good thing in the eyes of many, including myself, but in the process of killing those enemies and getting guns, you might notice that you're getting an ungodly amount of high tier loot. That's because legendaries are not rare at all. It feels like I get one at least every 30 minutes of playing, even from right at the beginning. The loot pools and the chances of getting higher tier loot, it's not done very well at all, and it makes getting legendaries and other high tier loot not exciting like how it used to feel in Borderlands 2 for example. If you're farming for a drop in Borderlands, it's genuinely butt-clenching suspense when you see a legendary drop, with the anticipation where the hours where you've been trying to get this one weapon was worth it, or if it's just a different legendary drop. Whereas Borderlands 3, you get about 3 legendaries per psycho, it feels like. Now, this isn't an issue if Borderlands 3 is the only Borderlands game that you've played, as that's now the standard for you. But if you're coming from the previous games and you know how long it can take to get a certain weapon, it makes makes Borderlands 3 feel like it's almost on easy mode, and it takes a lot of the fun out of the most important aspect of the game. Farming. Although it's annoying how common drops are in this game, throughout my time playing it, I've just become familiar with it and just accepted that this is how the game works. If I want a more challenging or just more of a Borderlandish feel of farming, I'll just go play Borderlands 2. Guns. On a more positive note, the guns in the game are some of the best. Now, as much as I love the Sandhawk from Borderlands 2, there comes a time when you have to move on, and Borderlands 3 helps you with this, and eases you into a whole new world of innovations of guns, as smooth as butter. No, but seriously, these guns in Borderlands 3 are just fun, and that is what the Borderlands franchise is about. There are some old guns that make a return in Borderlands 3, such as the Unkempt Herald and the Sandhawk, but I remember the first time playing through this game, and just not caring about making a build that does the most damage. It was more about what guns look the coolest or do the stupidest things, because they're just so unique. There's not much else to say about guns except they're fun. And of course the fact that there's over 1 billion of them in the game, but that's become standard in the franchise by now. Story. What else should be a standard by now is somewhat of an understanding on how to make a good story for the game. Borderlands 1, great. Borderlands 2, even better. The pre-sequel, great for filling in the gaps in the lore of the game and expanding on one of the best characters in video game history, Handsome Jack. But Borderlands 3, well, I'm not sure how to sum it up other than saying it's absolute dog shit. Now, to be fair, the idea of the Calypso twins is a great idea, but then someone decided, hey, let's make them social media influencers, which is a step in the wrong direction. But then to really put cement on the grave, someone also thought, hey, let's make them really unfunny and throw an unfunny joke at the player. I don't know, every 2 fucking seconds? Yeah, sounds like a plan. Honestly, I get that Borderlands is not a game people take seriously on the story aspect, but it doesn't need a heartfelt story that's taken too seriously. But this was just honestly intolerable. Whenever I hear anyone else talking about Borderlands 3, I frequently hear them saying that they mute the dialogue just to get through it. I can't say I'd go that far, but I can agree that after your first playthrough, you'll want to rip your hair out just thinking about having to listen to the useless dialogue from Tyreen and Troy. It's not just the villains though. As I said before, I think that they're a good concept, but it's just bad writing all around. Now, it's not just the writing that is insufferable, but the choices and the plot of the story is a bit questionable. First off, they decide to take Lilith's powers right at the beginning of the game, so that once feared Firehawk is just snuffed out right until at the very end, where she regains her powers to just go and headbutt Elpis, where she stays until we saw that Elpis was the planet that crashed into another planet in the Borderlands 4 trailer, meaning it was probably Lilith's doing. In all of the other games, Lilith is portrayed to be this powerful siren that people fear, and in this game, she plays zero importance in the story. She just stays at Sanctuary and sulks all day. Every day. Another shitty choice for the story was killing off Maya. Now, Maya was introduced in Borderlands 2 and has since been a fan favorite. In Borderlands 3, she had since taken a more peaceful route in life by residing on Athenas and working on making her new apprentice, Ava, into a siren one day. And don't worry, I will talk about Ava after this. But you meet her in one mission where you go to her planet, and it feels like about 5 minutes later, she's gone. Just killed by Troy by touching her arm. It's not even the fact she died, because I think to make a good story you need to have harsh and unexpected losses of deeply loved characters, but it's how it was done that bothers me, all in a single cutscene. There was no mission where you attempt to save her like you do for Tannis. You just kill a boss, go in a vault, come out, and boom, she's dead. And the reason why? I mean, yeah, it was Troy, I just said that, but it's debatably Ava's fault. Yeah, that annoying child that no one likes that you met about 1 mission ago, that does absolutely nothing else in the story other than be annoying and blame others for her own issues and wrongdoings. Now, after Maya dies, you return to Sanctuary, and every semi-important character gathers in a circle to talk about the loss of Maya. Sounds nice, right? No. No, it doesn't. And it doesn't get any better when you start listening to Lilith refuse to talk for no reason whatsoever, making Tannis take lead in quite possibly the shittiest writing in the whole game, where there's zero remorse shown. This is all followed by Ava blaming Lilith for the death of Maya, even though it was Ava's fault, after which she storms off and Lilith tells people to return to doing what they were doing. Now, sorry if that was a lot to take in. I did just kind of explain that whole segment of the story there, but it really is done so bad. No one cares that Maya died when they should. These were her friends that actually fought a side, but they just don't seem to care, not even one bit. It really is a shame to see such a good character have such a shitty outro to the franchise. And just to piss on her grave, it's followed by one of the many funny videos that Tyreen makes to show her fans of Maya dying, along with some goofy music. Overall, what I'm trying to say with the story is that it's got a good concept and had good potential, but some choices in the story were just outright bad and executed poorly. And the writing for most, if not all of the characters, is awful. But personally, I play Borderlands for the gameplay loop anyway, but it doesn't help shine a good spotlight on the game, as the story is probably the worst part of the whole game. DLCs. One redeeming factor of the story is the DLCs. Now, the corny and never-ending flood of unfunny jokes is still present here, but I think it's not as much. And on top of that, the plot for the DLCs aren't too bad. In fact, I personally like each one of them, with the Bounty of Blood being my favorite. I think that the DLCs in this game add a lot to it. Once you've beat the game and you find there isn't anything to do, the story and the new weapons and all the new environments that these maps bring to the game is enough to keep you playing for hours. There isn't much else to mention about the DLCs. They're good. They have more content, which is interesting, at least a little bit. And overall, I'd say Borderlands 3 does well on the DLC front. To be honest, if you've never played Borderlands 3 and you're still kicking after playing through the main story, it's the gameplay that's keeping you there anyway. So no matter the quality of the story in the DLCs, you'll still enjoy the new weapons that it adds to the game. End game content. The amount to do after beating the game for the first time is actually quite sizable. The first main thing is the Mayhem difficulty. These are different levels that determine how much harder the game becomes, but also grants better rewards such as increased loot drops. Not that it needs it, or more XP from enemies. There are 11 levels, and with each level getting harder up until level 10, and Mayhem 11 being as hard as Mayhem 10, but provides no benefits to the player, making it less rewarding, just harder. I think they did this because the game is generally quite easy, and the loot drop being too high, making the enemies harder to kill, can increase the feeling of getting a rare drop better, but it doesn't fix the issue in my opinion. When inside of these Mayhem levels, you'll get a certain Mayhem level gun depending on which level you're playing on. For example, if you're a Mayhem level 5, an enemy will drop a Mayhem level 5 item. The only time this changes is on Mayhem 11, where enemies still drop Mayhem level 10 weapons, as Mayhem 11 isn't really its own level, more of a way to just increase the difficulty by taking away benefits. Now obviously farming bosses is a thing, as it is in every Borderlands game, but I think with Mayhem levels, it is made quite a bit more fun, as you can't go straight to Mayhem 10 and kill a boss with a standard weapon. Well, you can, but why would you? It's more of a sense of progression if you slowly climb the levels, and I personally prefer doing it that way. So other than bosses, what is there? Well, there's 3 different slaughter circles, or slaughter shafts. I'm not really too sure what they're called, I forgot. But essentially, you basically go through multiple waves of enemies until you beat it, and that's about it. And these typically have a lot of drops and can be challenging at times. I personally enjoy doing them a lot if I ever go back to the game for a short period of time. But yeah, they are quite a blast. Upon beating your first playthrough, you can enter True Vault Hunter mode, where you replay the story at your current level with your current items that you still have equipped. It works the same as it does in the other Borderlands games, except there's no extra playthrough. In Borderlands 2, there's True Vault Hunter mode, and there's Ultimate Vault Hunter mode. Whereas in this game, the only additional playthrough is True Vault Hunter mode. Granted, you can reset it once you beat the game on the difficulty and play through True Vault Hunter mode again, but why would you want to suffer through the story a third time? Other than all of this, you can replay the game as different Vault Hunters. There's 4 to pick from, obviously. Side quests are available and DLC content, but that about wraps up the endgame content. I find that there's a lot of things to do with a lot of places and raid bosses to explore and kill. So overall, I'd argue that Borderlands 3 has a decent endgame content loop. And that's it. That's my take on the main aspects of Borderlands 3. It's by far not a perfect game, but it does some features really well, and some much better than its predecessors. And for that, I have to respect it. Although the story is terrible and the characters are actually suffocatingly annoying with their dialogue, I do really like Borderlands 3, and I think that people are too harsh on the game. Overall, at its core, it's a true Borderlands experience, and other than the story, I wouldn't have it any other way. But yeah, thanks for watching and goodbye.